If it wasn't hard enough to try to figure out if you should scale, whatever that means for you, then you have to figure out how to do it. That might be as challenging, if not more, than even deciding to do it. So, we're going to talk about scaling, how to do it, and more on episode 885 of today's Antidote.
Stay tuned for today's Antidote, brought to you by the Renegade Success Network. Today's Antidote features a healthy dose of thought-provoking insights and information for business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders, and nonprofit professionals. Each day since March of 2020, this program has offered that one thing to help you continue on your own unique pathway to success. And now, Renegades, we bring you Bob Graham and Tom Brush.
Sorry, I got a cat in my hand, so I can't give it the full attention it deserves.
That's a needy cat. And that is a judgment.
He definitely has his moments. I think because I got him when he was so young, I think he's kind of imprinted on me, and I think he thinks I'm his mother. So,
because cats aren't always that way, are they?
No, but I got him when he was young, and he is very. And some might argue that I have courted this behavior by being more attentive than some cat owners.
You're enabling him, is what you're saying.
That's it.
Fair enough.
I cater to him and entertain him a lot.
That's okay, I guess.
But he keeps me young, and we have a good time.
Fair enough. All right, everyone, good morning and welcome to today's Antidote, our daily broadcast and podcast, where each week Bob and I have a conversation around a topic, and then each weekday we dive a little bit deeper into that topic. And all week we've been talking about scaling and what that might mean for you or your business or your organization. And while we've talked a lot about the opportunities and the obstacles it presents, we've talked about trying to figure out when to do it, what it means. Well, today we're going to try to share a little bit of insight on how to do it. As we go through that conversation, if you have thoughts or ideas that you would like to share, especially if you have done this, we welcome them and know that it'll add value to our show. And sorry, I got caught up for a minute. We know that it'll add value to our show. And then at the conclusion of that conversation, Bob and I will each offer our one thing, our today's antidote. That thing that we hope will help you figure out how to take that next step when you might be uncertain. Or when you're trying to figure out, you've decided, okay, I'm going to scale. Now I need to figure out how to do it. Not really sure about that. So hopefully we might help you with some feedback, some thoughts, some ideas that might have an impact on what's real for you. And of course, if you have a one thing that you'd like to share, please feel free to put it in the comments, because we know there might be somebody out there who has been desperately seeking for that so that they can take their next step. Before, though, we dive into that.
Well, we should mention, Tom, we're recording this episode, so those comments will not appear in the actual program. They will appear in the notes, and we will comment on them as soon as we see them, but they will not actually appear on the program.
That is correct, because this is a recording. Thank you for that disclaimer. Before we dive into the conversation, though, the recorded conversation, each morning, Bob and I do our celebrations. So, Bob, what are you celebrating today?
I'm going to celebrate that you do that introduction stuff really well all the time, and you do the end part really well all the time, and I don't have to do it. And when you flub it a little bit like you did today, it reminds me of how effortlessly you do it. It's funny to me because I don't think you have note cards. I think you're like, I wonder if while you're sleeping, you're doing that out loud in your sleep.
No, I think I've just done it a few times. And
internalized it.
It's kind of like, the song that you loved growing up or the song that you loved at any time, and you get to know the words and you just never forget them. Even if it's 20 years later and you're like, wow, I hadn't thought about that song in 20 years, and yet I can still sing every word of it.
Yeah. Yes.
That way.
Okay.
So unfortunately or fortunately, 30 years from now, if we have stopped doing the show at some point and I hear that music or see somebody do
That would be funny.
dance at the start of the morning,
You're on your deathbed and I come to you.
you do a little da, 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 and I'm going to be like,
You start right into welcome to today's antidote. Everyone.
yes, right. Yes, indeed.
There you go.
Excellent.
So what are you celebrating?
So
And thank you for doing that each day.
My pleasure. I am celebrating that it is Friday and it's the weekend, the last lacrosse tournament weekend of the summer. And while I have greatly enjoyed it and it has gone well, it is always happy to have it complete. And then I'm not always worrying about, okay, where am I this weekend and what is the schedule that I have to put together and what official has to cancel and who do I have to find? And I don't have to be out on hot lacrosse fields very often for at least a few months. And so I'm celebrating all that has come through that this year and all the things that I have learned as a part of that process.
Well, and maybe we should use that as a case study if you're willing right now, because you did scale your business a bit there, right?
Sure.
So maybe we should talk about how you got to that. Because
wait a minute, you want me to talk about my stuff?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so now I have to figure out how do I do that a little bit and then get it back to you. Just saying. So you're
as easy as it looks. So if I recall, during the late last year, you had an opportunity to expand your business.
Mm-hmm.
And you spent what? Maybe a month and a half, if I'm not mistaken, 2 months really thinking about whether you wanted to do that?
Yes.
I know we talked about it twice, at least,
mm-hmm.
Before, after the program, and not in super detail, but some of the logistical aspects of it, because there was a financial component, there was a logistical component, and there was the, do you really want to do this part of it, which I think often people don't factor in. And I think as we're talking about how to do it, those are really the three things that you have to think about, right? Financial aspects of it, got to play a role. Might cost you some money in the beginning. It might be really lucrative, might not be. The second part is, do you have the processes and procedures and systems and people in place to grow it or to shrink it, whatever that looks like? And then the third one is, and I think this one really gets overlooked all the time, do you really want to do it? I think so often it's well, you got to do it.
Sure.
I mean, this only comes through once in a lifetime. Like I remember saying to you when you were talking about this opportunity, Tom, how many more of these do you think you'll get coming your way? And I think that plays a role. Am I missing any factors in your decision-making process? Because I'm trying to use that example from what I observed to come to some clarity around what the how is, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think those are broad enough categories that they probably cover all of the things that I contemplated.
Okay.
As I went through it.
And did you weight those three differently?
Interesting question.
Thank you. I like to draw on my journalism roots every now and then and ask that like 60 minutes question. If it were up to me, we'd zoom in on your face. So it'd be like, you're going to answer the question now and you say something really profound.
I think that it was, if I weighted those things differently. No, I think at the moment, well, yes, I would say I did weigh them differently.
Okay. So if you had 100%, how would you break that 100% among those three?
What was the second one?
Processes and people. Financial processes and people and willing or desire.
So I would say that I would probably place it at about 40 to 45% processes and people.
Okay.
Maybe I might even go to 50%. And then it was probably 25. Did I want to do it? And financial.
Okay. All right.
Because I had heard a lot of the obstacles. Obviously, they were obstacles with the last group that they worked with. And some of those obstacles I knew were way out of my control.
Mm-hmm.
That I was going to be relying on others to make decisions,
Mm-hmm.
because they had struggled to find enough people. And while that was a concern, I also knew that there were opportunities, just like always, with obstacles that they had not explored, and that I knew that I had some leverage around. I don't know, leverage is the right word, although I at least was aware of and willing to sort of take that next step. So I think that was a part of it. So I
Okay.
definitely weighed some of those things, because I think also those were the things I knew the most. I knew the most about, or I knew was going to be the most impactful. Like whether I wanted to do it or not I probably didn't spend as much time thinking about that, because I think I had a sense.
Okay.
And the financial, I was uncertain what that looked like, knowing
Okay.
some of the things that I knew.
Okay.
And so
So
it was,
now you're about 5-6 months into it, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Would you weigh those things differently today?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. I think I would do them the same. I think mostly because I think the two that were 25% financial and do I want to do it were like either sides of that coin. If
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense. Is
Mm-hmm.
like they weren't um, they weren't going to make or break it. I don't think. I knew kind of that I was interested in doing it. I knew kind of that there was going to be additional revenue. I wasn't exactly sure what that looked like. It was more about the,
You also knew there was going to be additional work for you,
sure.
right? So, I mean, it's not
Yes.
like you were just going to go to the bank and cash checks.
Correct.
You've had a much busier spring this year than you
Actually,
did
it's
last year.
interesting. I would disagree with that in some regards. Because last year,
And you must be working on another podcast in the background. You have the Mistress podcast, don't you?
I think I'm differently busy this year. I think that because what happened was, and I knew this going in, 2 events that were on additional weekends last
Okay.
year, where I was not going to do, because because the location, one was a once in a maybe lifetime opportunity,
Okay.
and the other one moves on a fairly regular basis, and it moved out of our area. So I knew that they were going to have somebody else do that. And so in some regards, I knew that the overall time was going to be similar. So I wasn't
Okay.
adding more dates. I was just adding more stuff to the dates that I already had.
Okay.
I also knew that I had someone who had worked with the last organization that was interested in working with the next. And so part of that was helped with the processes piece of it and the workload of it.
Okay.
So I think some of those things were things that I knew, and I knew that to take this on, I was going to have to let go of something, and I did. And I think that was part of the piece that had made it different. Had those 2 things stuck around, I'm not sure I could have done it. Probably would have tried, and it would have been more challenging, because it just left less breaks to sort of catch up.
Well, and I think that's a really important part of this is maybe the 4th factor that I just come to is time. Right.
Sure. That's part of the process.
So financial, people and processes, desire, and time, because you have a limited amount of time. And if you added this and it meant you were going to work 60 more hours a week, that would be untenable long term. You could do it for a month, maybe.
Right.
Well, and I think sometimes, and all four of those, as I think through them, are things that I talk to people about when they're looking to expand or contract. Those four things are the factor that really it. So I think that might be my one thing. I think I came up with how to do it is really simple. You got to look at the money aspects of it, the financial. You got to look at your people and processes. You got to look at your desire, and you've got to look at the time investment. And does it fit with the other aspects of your life? Or if it's a company with 20 employees or 100 employees, can your company take it on? Do you have the bandwidth? If everyone's already working 10 hours overtime and you want to bring in another project, maybe not. And conversely, if you want to constrict, can you do it with your employees? Can you keep the employees that you have, or are you going to have to let people go? And if you let people go, what are the implications of that?
Sure. Well, what's interesting too is that given all of that, and all the thinking that went into all of that, what I didn't expect, which is I think why it made the summer seem maybe to you busier, was the additional work that I took on in my coaching and consulting business.
Okay.
And that I think was not as, I think either I was more aware of it or I took less on because I knew I had those weekends that I thought that this year were open were now filled.
Okay.
That made things, again, that I couldn't have necessarily expected and took on, not knowing what the outcomes, the challenges that might create. I had the biggest event we do all summer and had 3 in-person presentations that week.
Right.
That I took
and this
on.
podcast every day.
Right. So although I knew this, like this was a known entity, like, okay, how do I, and since most
But also takes time.
Sure.
We've recorded more episodes this summer than we've ever done.
Yes. And I think that is more a factor for me of the work from my other business that has picked up. Because I think
it's also post-COVID. I mean, you and I are both out and about far more than we were 2 years ago. When we started this, we were at our house 24/7. There wasn't really a conflict.
Right.
Then it started to loosen up a bit, and I think that's what people are starting to sense that now. It's like, whoa. Like I heard someone say, I feel like I'm back to normal. I'm like, oh, what do you mean? They're like, this is like how busy I was pre-COVID in just, they said they've been to the dry cleaners twice that month, last month. They're like, I haven't been to dry cleaners once a month in 3.5 years. And I was like, you know what? You're right. I've taken my shirts to the dry cleaners more than I have in a long time. So that's the other factor in this that I think lots of people are probably feeling is groups are meeting in person. People are having coffee and they're having lunches in person. Overnight travel for work starting to expand. And those all play a role in that decision when you're talking about scaling.
Certainly.
Just like scaling during COVID was its own unique animal. It's like, well, can I do this remotely? Can I scale remotely? I don't know that I could.
Right.
So what's your one thing?
So my one thing I think is a little different, although I think it's something else has to be contemplated, is, putting the plan in place. And I talked a little bit about that yesterday. Mm-hmm. I think so often we just think about it and do it. Or we have put a plan in place, and yet once we get some initial results, based on those results, we throw it out the window and feel like we need to do something different. And so I think that to me, the plan of, and as we go through plans is like, okay, when am I going to start taking the action? For how long am I going to take the action where I am going to just take the feedback from the results we get? And at what point will I stop and sort of measure progress towards whatever the goal was I thought I was going to have, and then figure out how to to move forward. Now, all of those things come with a lot of contemplation of some of the things that you discussed. And, and then even once you get that plan in place, it's how do you execute it and stay accountable to it without letting the emotion of results start to impact that accountability.
Or the emotion around the choices you made.
Which are usually based on the results that you get, correct?
Well, what could be that, wow, I'm investing a lot of money here.
Or
just looking at your checking account and going, oh, wow, there's a lot less money in this account than I thought there was. Or, boy, I'm working some extra hours here. That's not results. That's just effects, right?
Well, it's kind of the results, right? Aren't results and effects sort of the same thing? Is that you take an action?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah,
that's you get
fair.
Results, which are kind of the effect of the action.
Right.
And I think that's it, is that it's, you get results and then you let the emotion take over and you start to lose the accountability that you thought was going to be the thing that was going to help drive you to what you desired. So I think there's a lot to it and a lot to contemplate as, there's definitely steps. And I think you talked about 4 of the things that definitely should be incorporated into.
And if someone's got a 5th or a 6th or a 7th, I'd love to put them in the comments. I would love to get this list as comprehensive as possible. But those are the 4. Was it 4? Yeah, it was 4 that I can come up with.
Yeah, as comprehensive as possible is an interesting phrase, because you could have a billion people share a billion things that could go on that list.
But I still think that would be useful to look at.
Of course.
And maybe if there were a billion things on that list, I might pick off 10. These are the 10 that matter to me. Like someone might go, I don't really care about my desire. My desire is to grow my business. So therefore, my desire, whether I want to do it, is already predetermined. I'm going after whatever is going to make me money.
Right.
I can think of a person I worked with at one point that was their drive. There wasn't a discussion about, do I want to do this or not want to do this? Does it enhance my bank account? Yes. Boom, we're in.
Well, and I think one of the tips is that when understanding, there's the prioritizing and the decision making. I think there's also the understanding of how those priorities will impact emotion when results come in.
Sure.
And I think that's, again, something that people think. So I think it's a challenging thing to do, and one that probably, I would suggest people try not to do it alone. And so, because you're always going to be limited by your knowledge, experience, and perspective, and you could always bring in others.
And your emotions.
Of course. So if you have one thing that you would like to share, your antidote, please feel free to put it in the comments, and Bob and I will be sure to go back and review it and add our thoughts to it. And of course, if you're listening to this on the podcast, you can always join us where there's a place to share your comments in our Facebook group, Sculpt Your Business, from Chaos and Confusion to Confidence and Control. So we look forward to seeing you in that Facebook group. And if not, we will see you Monday morning, 7 a.m.-ish Eastern time, for our next episode of Today's Antidote.
New topic next week, right? We're going to tackle more is less, or less is more.
Less is more.
Less is more.
I don't know. Maybe we'll decide that more is less.
I'm fascinated by this. You challenged me this week to something, and I'm going to report the results on Monday's program. I had someone ask me about it last night.
Really?
Yes. I had explained it, and that person was asking me about, what are the things that you've done in your business that you've done less of? So that you got some traction.
We'll see how I'm now waiting with bated breath for the results.
There you go. Well, that's the goal of these teases, right? So if you're someone who's trying to figure out what more is less means, no, less is more. I keep getting it backwards. It's early. What less is more means, we're going to talk about that all next week. It's a fascinating topic, and I'm going to give you some real life examples from what I've been through in the last week trying to implement that and trying to understand that. And in the meantime, before next Monday's program, you know what you got to do? You got to go out and embrace the renegading you. It's so worth it. I'm telling you, you will not be sorry. Less is more will make more sense to you if you are more of a renegade this weekend.
More sense or less sense?
I don't know.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much. Go out and enjoy your day. We will see you soon.
Hey, if you're trying to figure out how to make your business or your leadership work in a new way, a way that you thought was possible, a way you think is possible, you just can't figure it out. That's why our Sculpt Your Business program is there. I know you're saying, hey, I'm a leader. What if I don't have a business? I have an organization, a nonprofit, or a government agency. Hey, guess what? It works for you too. We will be happy to talk to you. You can sculpt the business your way to go from chaos and confusion to confidence and control. Think about what confidence and control could mean. It means getting up and knowing where you're going, what you're doing, and how you're going to get there, and feeling like you have things under control. It's possible. We want to help you. Just go to renegadesuccessnetwork.com or ask Tom or Bob. It's that easy. See you soon.